Hello. There was this girl, and I've known her since freshman year of high school. And me and her were friends for a while. You know, me and her had a class together, and me and her had a class together, and me and her would always talk together because me and her were friends. So we were friends for a while, you know, and I also remember when she'd also used to make a vlog when me, her, and her friends were having a class together, right? So, you know, and then next year, and then after that, then next term starts to roll in. And in my school, each term we were assigned new classes. So there's usually 4 classes, 4 periods in a term, and you know, we get new classes next term. So I just did just that, and and then so my new classes rolled in, and you know, I still have her in my new classes. And back in my old classes, me and Emily, I think me and that girl were probably good friends to each other. You know, we'd always say hi to each other. We always asked each other like how our days were, you know, and we'd always check in on each other, and you know, she'd always know the small details about me, and just that. And I had my new classes. Me and her just said hi for a while, and you know, she'd check up on me. You know, she'd always ask me how my day's been, you know, and all of that. And you know, at that time, she's talking to other guys, right? So, you know, she's talking to other guys, and I was talking to other girls too. So you know, she'd always notice anything about me, you know. She noticed a lot about me, and you know, she noticed how I've been moving that term, you know, and you know, she had a Valentine for Valentine's Day. I think not a Valentine necessarily, but she was talking to another guy, and I was talking to another girl. But while I was still talking to that girl, I still had a crush on her. That's when I developed a crush on her. Well, the reason why I had a crush on her was because I just thought that she was cute. I liked her eyes. I liked her personality. Well, she does cheer, so that's attractive too. And she's gotten cute eyes. She has cute eyes, you know. She's short. That's what I like about her. And, you know, that's just what I like about her, you know. And then afterwards, you know, I always like cannot stop looking at her during class. I couldn't stop looking at her during class, even though I was talking to that other girl who was also on the same cheer team as her, by the way. You know, I just couldn't stop looking at her. And, you know, I also like how her voice sounded too. That one as well. And, you know, I always liked it when she'd always talk to me, you know. And then, you know, at that time we had a class, but like that was just only one semester. So just one semester is just 45 days. So after 45 days, then we moved to a different class. And, you know, it's still the same people. So we just moved to a different class. And then, you know, I'm seated right there, and she's seated, like, over there. So, you know, at that time, I'm still talking to that girl, right? To that other girl. But, yeah, I can't stop looking at her, right? So, you know, she hasn't talked to me in a long time. I've seen her talk to that other guy. And I talked to that other girl, but then she just said that, you know, she friend zoned me. And then, you know, later on, you know, a few months later, she ended up with another guy. But, you know, that's a story for another day. So she she'd always, she'd always like ignore me, you know. She would talk to me one time when she was just selling snacks, and then I told her that I didn't have any money, and she's like, hey, don't worry, don't stress, you know, I'm always here. And, you know, that's just cute, you know. I feel like she's flirting, you know. And, you know, eventually, you know, I keep looking at her, you know, and, you know, I always want myself to be noticed by her, right? Because, you know, she's cute, she's sweet, she's all those traits that I like, right? So she made me feel like I want her to make me feel like I'm noticed again, right? So, you know, a couple months passed by, and then after that, during the last day of school, me and her were talking, and then me and her were like, you know, talking again, and then, you know, she asked me if I remember like last term, and I was like, yeah, you know, and, you know, she said that, you know, since I do jiu-jitsu, by the way, quick little update, I do jiu-jitsu right now, and, you know, she says that I do flashy stuff in jiu-jitsu, you know, so that just warmed my heart, because now I feel like that girl was the only person I ever loved, like I ever fell in love with, right? So, you know, and, you know, we were talking for a while, and, you know, I actually get to know a couple things some things about her, like her middle name, you know. I also know her middle name too. Her middle name's Lynn, but that's not important. So after that, then summer began to hit, right? And over the summer, I just started to think about her too much, you know. I started to think about her too much to the point where it's just, well, I don't know what word to describe it, but it's just overwhelming, right? So, you know, think. So one time I posted something on my Instagram. I added a story on my Instagram, and then she like replied asking who if I'm taken or not. And I'm like, no. And then she's like, well, who do you like now? And then I just started to get a bit nervous because why is she asking all that questions? And then I'm afraid to just say that it's her. So I just lied, and then I said that it's her friend, and then like I said that the one that I like the most is friends with her, and then she just left me on scene, and then she just blocked me all of a sudden, and I just didn't know why. I didn't know why, right? I mean it's just what I posted on my story, right? So I was sad, I was worried, I just didn't know why, right? And then that's just the start of me losing my mind. So I just tried my best to not think about it, and then once school came, I had a class with her, but then she switched out, and I liked her. I kept talking about her during school, and then I decided to go up to her. She was all blushy and well, sorry for my language, but she was all blushy and shit, right? So she talked. I just asked her like, hey, why'd you switch out? And then I was like, because I didn't like the class, And earlier she told me that she liked my shirt, which was kind of good, right? But then, the second time I talked to her, she's like, hey, personal space this, personal space that, right? Like, well, whatever, right? And then, she was talking to other guys at that time, so I told her ex, right? Because she had an ex. So I told her ex that I liked her, and then, he's like, I don't care. Even though deep down I know he does care, right? Let's see. So then, I just like tried to ask her to Hoko, right? Because Hoko was around the corner at the time. So I decided to ask. I decided to well, look, I just made her friend make a poster for me, and then she told me that she cannot date and that she's going with her friends, which is honestly heartbreaking. But you wanna know what else is heartbreaking? I went to a football game, and she's a cheerleader, right? I went to the football game, and then earlier I seen one of my classmates ask me if how I would feel if he asked her out to Hoko. And then I was just joking. I was like, oh, I would do this and this. I didn't realize that he'd actually do that. So afterwards, I went to the football game. I went home early because it was too late. And then I heard the news that he asked her to Hoko. And honestly, that shit was so heartbreaking, right? Shit was heartbreaking as fuck. And then that was also another instance where I kind of lose my mind. Because now it's hard for me to focus in school because I just heard the news. And, my teacher was understanding of that, he delayed the assignment, But it's just been hard for me to focus in school, right? It's just hard for me to focus in school, for me to focus on what I want to do. And so it's been hard for me to focus in school, right? Because ever since I liked her, it's just that now I'm not focused on school anymore. I'm just focused on her, right? And then now I'm just starting to get D's, getting back. I'm starting to make a habit of not doing my work, just thinking about her when I'm doing my work or something, and then I just don't actually focus, and then now my grades are slowly starting to slip, right? So, he asked her out to Hoko, right? But that was just only a one-time thing, right? As his friend said, because she can't date. But then, her ex decided to she decided to get back with her ex, and then now that's even more heartbreaking for me because now I thought that they're not gonna be together, and then now they got together, and then I thought that she was gonna be with him, and then now she's gonna be with him, and then now it's just all confusing, and there's a lot of stuff in my head already. So afterwards, he always tries to be like loud and all in my face. He doesn't tell me directly. Her ex doesn't directly tell me that he stole that girl. Even because like me and her ex were classmates at that time. So, and we were kind of friends, right? Me and her ex. And he'd be loud about that. And he asked me to check her story, and then it pulled up, and then it was him and her at the pumpkin patch. And then my other friend told me that they kissed right after taking her photo. And then that just kind of made me sick, right? I mean, I tried my best not to worry about it, but it's still in my head, right? So, she's still on my mind, right? But I'm just too afraid to talk to her because she might shut me down. So then afterwards, she breaks up with her ex, right? For the second time. And then she gets back with the guy who asked, she gets back to talking with the other guy who asked her to Hoko, right? And earlier, I think her and her friends started to say hi to me, which was awkward, right? Her and her friends started to say hi to me, and then I thought that she actually liked me again. And then she started to get back with the guy who asked her to Hoko. And then now it's just, I don't know, it's just a lot of stuff is in my head, right? A lot is in my head, and just, I don't know. And afterwards, breaks started to hit, and, earlier I was just viewing her social media, and then I just started to cry, because, of what she did to me, She kept talking to other guys, and, she made me think that I liked her, and it's just, oh my, I just can't tell all the details, because I don't want to tell the story like over and over and over and over again. I'm just already done with telling the full story, but anyways, I was crying, and, then the new semester started to hit, and, I heard from one of her friends that she actually liked me again because she already broke up with the guy that asked her to Hoko. But then, I heard that she's gonna get a restraining order on me, right? You'll see why in a moment. But And then, one of her friends told me that, I'm this, I'm that, one of her friends told me that, I'm dead ass a creep, right? I don't step on shit, right? I'm, I'm not tough, He always tells me that I'm weak, that I'm ugly, that I'm short, I'm too short, and that I'm not. He's just telling me a lot of stuff, and just directly telling me that I'm just not enough for her, and then that just, made a hole in my heart. I just had a hole in my heart because of it, and now I feel like there's been a lot of other stuff going on at school, right? But that's just a story for like another day, right? So afterwards, I just started to cry. I started to break down, because that girl, she didn't like me, and all that. And, it was just a lot of days of crying, because I just feel like I just didn't felt loved by the girl that was super lovable, right? I feel like is the most lovable girl, right? So it's just a sad story, but so I just made her think that, I just stayed too attached to her during my entire sophomore year and just some of my freshman year. I just stayed attached to her, and it has just been like a lot in my head, right? A lot in my head. Well, freshman year, it was bad. My obsession with her was bad, but not too bad. But sophomore year, definitely. Because, sophomore year is when, shit gets hard, right? When all the subjects in school get hard. So, sophomore year, it's just been hard to focus. Because of everything that's happened, it's just hard to focus. It's just hard to focus, right? Because, I would wake up, I would go to school. I would go to school thinking about her, spend all 4 periods thinking about her, going to lunch to see all her paths, where she's at, what she's doing. And, I'd spend every minute of class just thinking about her instead of me focusing on my work. And studying, well, I study, but it's hard for me to focus when I'm studying because I kept thinking about her. And so, I think about her, and I always see her during passing periods, so I always just like watch her from above since, they had a new building in my school. So I watch her from above the new building, and then, she'd always look at me, and then, she'd always be creeped out, but whatever. But, I'd always look at her during passing periods. It's just every minute of my life, I was always obsessed with her. So it's been hard for me to do my homework. It's hard for me to get some sleep too. It's also hard for me to get some sleep too because I'm always thinking about her always thinking about her during nighttime, and probably I just stay up during. Probably the most latest I stay up at is probably 1:02 a.m. Just thinking about her, thinking about X, Y, and Z. I always think about the future that I have for her, and all of that, and especially when I saw her and her ex hugging during the football game, because her ex is a football player, by the way, and she's a cheerleader, so that dynamic, the football player and the cheerleader. But when I saw them hug, it's just that now I just stay up at night until 2 a.m. just thinking about it. That stress and all that in my head just made it hard for me to focus in school. And now I just got, shit grades, I mean, I passed geometry with a D, but like if I want to go to college, then, because my state has like college requirements, I don't know for your states or anything, or if you live in America or anything, but my state, if you want to go to college, you need to have a C minus or D in all subjects, right? So I had no choice but to retake geometry, but I'll get to that in a moment. But I spent every waking moment of my life obsessed with her. Even during break, I'm obsessed with her. I can't stop thinking about her. I keep crying over her. I'm losing sleep over her. I get jealous every time she's talking to other guys. I always stalk her reposts on TikTok, right? I always stalk her socials. And then, she blocked me, by the way, so that was also another reason why I cried over winter. So I'd stalk her stuff. And, her friends also noticed that I liked her, because I keep saying too much, right? So, at the same time, it's just, I just spent my entire I just kind of, anytime her friends would always tell me that, she liked me, then, or she put this on a note about me and all that, then, I'd always think about it all the time during class, even though I know she don't like me, right? And it's just been hard for me to focus on school, because now I'm getting B's and C's, and, I know I could do better, because earlier I have, like, A pluses and a 3.0 GPA, but now it's just lowered down to a 2.0. So, it's just lowered down to a 2.0. So, I'm thinking about her, I'm losing sleep over her, and then, it's been hard to focus on school because of her. Because I'm obsessed with her, because I'm thinking about her, because of that and this. So, but then, all the drama at school was happening, and her friend who's a guy, by the way, started to bully me, right? Started to bully me, saying that I'm weak, that I'm ugly, and then, that started to make me insecure, and then I finally cried, and it's been a whole week, all week, since I've cried. I've cried over her. I've also wished bad for her because of what she did to me, right? So, I was crying, right? It's just non-stop tears, right? Because she didn't make me feel loved. She did not make me feel loved. I thought that she would love me, but no. She did not make me feel loved, that bitch did not make me feel loved. That bitch. Sorry for my language, but that bitch did not make me feel loved. Alright. She was just dating other... Well, I don't want to say the N-word, right? But she was dating other people. She was dating other guys, and she was just prioritizing other guys over me. And then now, is it just because I'm weak? Is it just because I'm ugly? Is it just because I'm Asian? Like, what could be the fucking reason, right? What could be the fucking reason? Is it just that I'm short? Is it that I'm weak? Is it that I don't lift weights? Is it that I don't lift weights? Is it just that I just wrestle? What could be the fucking reason? So that's why I cried, because now, like, all these insecurities are brought up on me. Saying that I'm weak, saying that I'm ugly, saying that I'm short, saying that I never lift weights. So I just cried, and I just had all these insecurities. I just had all these fucking insecurities in my head. And then, all the drama in that school, I just decided to tell the principal, tell an adult, tell my parents. And, I just had non-stop crying, right? And eventually, there are some videos that popped up on YouTube, right? And I just realized that popped up on my TikTok, and then it just said that, hey man, hey, that girl ain't, and then those videos just said that, hey, that girl is not my bitch, and that I should just focus on the money, just focus on myself, and just focus on God. So I realized that, hey, if she's not talking to me, if she's not respecting me, if she's choosing other guys, then I should just leave her the fuck alone, right? I mean, so I should just leave her the fuck alone, and I should just focus on myself. So I was crying a lot, and those videos popped up, and they did help, and one video was like, hey man, hey, I don't give a fuck if that bitch left you. I don't give a fuck if that shit happened or that shit didn't go your way. You have to keep your head up, chin up, and your chest out. So that's when I realized that I wasted my sophomore year on a bitch. I did not enjoy my sophomore year. I just put it to waste because of a bitch that didn't want me. That a bitch that wanted me at first, but then made me feel hated. Did not make me feel loved. She did not do her part. If that bitch wanted to, she would, right? Respectfully, right? Because I'm obviously angry, right? That's why I keep calling her bitch and all that, but I want to just get this out of the way, right? So she just doesn't love me anymore, and and then at that time, during all this that's happening, I started to do wrestling, and we did the they did the like, and then they announced something about off-season practices, and then but like, that's a story for another time. But anyways, me seeing those videos was just time to just fucking let her go, right? So I just realized that I wasted my sophomore year on a bitch, right? So I've gotten D's and F's because of a bitch. I've gotten a 2.0. I've gotten shit grades because of that bitch. I'm losing sleep over that bitch, and I'm all in my head because of that bitch, and there's just too much, and I'm just doing what I'm doing because of that bitch. I'm always looking at her, following her, watching her during passing periods. So I just thought that I just needed a change. So I started to grow closer to God than ever. I mean, it just took some tiny steps. I started to read this book right there. Read this book. I started to read this book. I started to read the Bible every day, and then that turned into me having conversations with the priest at my local church, right? And then afterwards, it started with me thanking God. Thanking God every day, and me praying and talking to God throughout my day. And me trying to apply what is in this book, because I realized that if I wanted to get closer to God, you don't just read this and then throw it in the trash, right? You read this and you apply it if you want God's blessing. If I wanted God's blessing. So I started to do that. I started to do that, and I started to really focus on myself, because since I passed geometry with a really shit grade, I realized that I should do better. So I decided to retake geometry again. And now I just decided to retake geometry. I got like new math notes, and it's starting to become a little bit easier for me, right? I try to study. I try to make sure that I either pass with a C or better, right? There's still some stuff I have trouble with in math, but that's probably just the way it is, So I just started to focus more on school, and focus more on getting good grades, because 1, it makes my parents proud. 2, it makes me even more mentally, and 2, it makes me more mentally tougher, and 3, it's just the right thing to do. Because now, if I get good grades, then that means I get to go to a good college and get a good scholarship, which I want to do for my parents, not for myself, right? So I want to just do that to make my parents proud, to live up to my parents, and I started to focus on myself. I started to do wrestling during October while I was still stuck on her, and I decided to make progress during the off season. So I was working. I was working every day, working out, practicing my shots, push-ups, squats, just anything to get me bigger and stronger to get me stronger, faster, and more explosive next season, right? So that can be more tougher next season, right? And obviously I didn't attend any off-season camps, but that's a story for another day, right? So I started to really focus in and lock in on wrestling. And I started to change up my routine. I started my day with thanking God, right? Praise the Lord. And, I started to hang out with people who really cared about me, right? So then I just realized that, hey, that bitch was just not for me, hey, fuck that bitch, fuck that bitch, and, I deserve way better than that, I deserve way more better than that bitch who hurt me. So I read this. So now I'm just focused on God, and I'm focused on wrestling. Jesus in wrestling, Jesus in wrestling, Jesus school in wrestling, Jesus school wrestling, Jesus school wrestling, Jesus school wrestling. Instead of that girl now. But now I've just been trying to forgive her, right? I've also been trying to forgive her. I call her bitch in this video, but, in reality, I'm just trying to pray for her, trying to forgive her and all that. Because, she was just not the right person for me. That was also what my friend told me. She's not the right person for me. So, I just have to rely on God's timing and not just let her ruin my sophomore year. It's just all God's timing. So, I'm focusing on myself now, so moral of the story is just to not waste your sophomore year on a bitch. Alright? I wasted a lot of months of my life trying to overthink and lose sleep because of that bitch. And just now I'm just stuck in my head rather in reality. So just don't lose your mind over a bitch. Alright? Don't lose your mind over a bitch. You can't control what that bitch does or says, right? Just always choose to let go. If she hurt you, then always just choose to let go. Let go. Any feelings, any anger, any heartbreak, any of that, all of those other feelings, you just give it to God. Just give it to the person above. And I know it's been hard for me to do that because I'm always stuck in my emotion and stuck in my head, but, I'm trying to do that. And, give it to God. Always forgive her. Even if she hurt you, always forgive her. Do not wish bad on her. Don't crash out. Because, of course, crashing out will lead you... If you crash out, you can't get yourself back. And of course, that's what I also did too. Crash out over a bitch too. So, just landed me in more trouble. So just don't crash out over a bitch. You know, focus on yourself. Focus on your studies. Focus on sports. Make your parents proud. You know, just never lose your mind over a bitch. It's just not worthy of it. You know, read this, apply this in your life. You know, talk, you know, make friends, make some new friends, you know, have some friends to talk to about it. You know, do something that keeps your mind away from her. Okay, so focus on yourself, King, and you know, you are worthy, you are loved. You are loved, you belong, you know, if you're watching this, you're not ugly, you know, you're a strong person if you're going through this right now, you are a strong person for going through this right now, because maybe the person above is testing you and seeing if you're actually gonna have some faith in him, right? So, you know, you have to believe, so, you know, you have to believe in Jesus, you have to keep your head up, you have to focus on your studies, you have to focus on yourself, and eventually, you know, you will let go and always keep forgiving her, even though, you know, she did you wrong. So that's it, man. Just focus on the money, focus on the bag. You know, Game of Pickles 9 through 3 out.